Welcome to the Greater Culture Podcast, where we have conversations about how to elevate the quality of life through movement, nutrition, recovery, and mindset practices. Welcome back to another episode of the Greater Culture Podcast. Brad Marshall, your host, and today I'm very excited to be joined by Dr. Austin Chiang. He's a physical therapist here in the Raleigh-Durham area. Really excited to dive into all of his thoughts and perspectives on movement, what he's come to learn, how he works with athletes, and ways that we can help everyone out there live a happier, healthier life. So, Austin, thanks so much for taking some time to join us today on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Super excited.
So a physical therapist, we know that takes a lot of time and energy and effort to achieve that. Love for you to give us a little background and a little insight into what your journey's been like, deciding that you wanted to become a physical therapist and how that road unfolded for you.
For sure. So when I was in high school, when I was growing up, my dad, he's a interventional radiologist in Eastern North Carolina. So he's big time surgeon in Greenville, and growing up my whole life, he always kind of pushes, not pushed, that's a bad way to put it. Always wanted me to do some form of medicine, like go to med school, stuff like that. So that was kind of the goal out of high school. So went to University of Georgia, go Dogs. The kind of pre-med up to the point, started taking the hard science classes like the OChem and stuff like that, which I think that's what weeds kind of people out. So yeah, I was pre-med up to that point. Didn't really know for sure what I wanted to do. My major was exercise science, and a lot of kids in that major, they were all pre-PT, and like that really hadn't crossed my mind before. Everything was just pre-med, and then once I kind of got more into those classes and more like my ex-phys stuff, and then I was kind of leaning towards stuff like that, and that was more interesting to me versus like OChem and all the other stuff you got to do for pre-med stuff. So once I got to like the OChem too, I was like, all right, this isn't for me. I don't want to do that stuff. I'll let the smart kids do that. Didn't really know I wanted to do PT until probably like my senior year of undergrad. And by that point, it's like I had all this other stuff I needed to do before that. So I knew there's going to be kind of like a nice little gap year between undergrad and PT school. So after undergrad, graduated, lived in Raleigh for a little bit, worked as a PT aide or tech for a year. And as I just kind of did all the stuff for PT school and applied, didn't get in my first time. So I had to go back again, and then got into High Point University, went there, and then there for 3 years. Graduated 2020. I think that was the first COVID year. So that was fun. But I worked for a couple years in a place in Clayton, and now in the past year, I've gone on my own, and I've done my Beyond Movement stuff for the past 9 months. So that's kind of short version, I guess.
Yeah, a lot of education, a lot of opportunities to interact and work with all different types of populations, especially when it comes to movement. And when you interact with folks and they ask, hey, what does a physical therapist do? How do you typically inform people of what a physical therapist does, how you help people? What do you tell those folks?
It probably depends on the situation too, and I kind of who's asking. Pretty much I tell them we get you out of pain, help you move better. That's probably the most simple way to put it. I know that kind of leaves some gray areas still, but that's kind of my go-to. I like to leave it a little gray.
I love how short and concise that is because, working with athletes, you get a variety of folks who come up and are like, oh, this hurts, or maybe tweak this, injure this. Who should I go see? Chiro, massage, PT. It's kind of like if there's some pain there and we're experiencing some of that, it might be a good idea to get it looked at by a physical therapist, and they can help you in that regard. So when you think about, or as your sort of journey unfolded, were you an athlete, or how did movement play a role in your life? Because being with Beyond Movement now, you get a chance to work a lot with athletes. So were you an athlete growing up, and what were some of your endeavors?
Yeah, so when I was growing up, I played baseball pretty much my entire life up until I was 21, 22-ish. Played football in high school. Went through just like your not standard, but went through a handful of injuries like most kids do. Been in and out of PT a couple of times, but like that never really, I guess, like led me to wanting to be a physical therapist. I kind of just like I knew what it was, didn't really spark my interest at the time. But I've always worked like since high school. I've always just worked out regularly. And I kind of like that aspect of it too. So in my head, from the whole medical side combined with working out, I feel like PT kind of meshed the two together where I was like, oh, this seems like a perfect fit. So that's kind of how I ended up in PT.
Yeah. And would you say that the way you think about movement and working out and staying fit has changed over the years, moving from baseball player up into those early 20s into then studying what movement and what the body's capable of? And then now, sort of on the back end, still working out and moving, now working with other folks. How has the way you think about movement, fitness, and working out maybe changed over the years?
Well, one, it's changed a whole lot in the past. I'll just say even 5. So like when I was in high school and you do weightlifting and stuff like that, which any high school guy is going to go into the gym and just do like the cool like big muscle stuff. So like that's where I started, and then I was always, which is funny now that because now I coach CrossFit too. I've been doing CrossFit for the past 5 years. Before that, I told myself I would never do CrossFit. I was like, this is the worst thing you could possibly do. Then I started doing CrossFit, fell in love with it. Now I coach. But yeah, just like I feel like I've dabbled into a lot of different things over the past 10 years, and I feel like with my own personal stuff, I feel like I've taken little bits and pieces of everything as far as like bodybuilding, CrossFit stuff. Some of the stuff I do, what people probably would even call it like Pilates and stuff like that. So I kind of use all the things I've done in the past 5 to 10 years and kind of combine them together to kind of form how I practice movement myself and how I do with a lot of patients as well.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially when you think about working out to be able to perform a certain sport, task, something better. There's going to be a very focused effort on that. Then, if you get some injuries, there's some rehab and things like that. But then you kind of get through maybe some of those athletic endeavors. And now I need to move to try and have a good quality of life. I want to be able to keep up with my kids. I want to be able to say yes to all of the fun activities. So when it comes to, you mentioned CrossFit as something you found, started doing yourself, and then now get a chance to interact with CrossFit as a coach, as well as, physical therapist. What's been your perspective, or what has been your experience like with CrossFit as a way to just try and help us get a little movement in our day, help us feel good and be able to do all the fun stuff we want to do outside of the gym?
Right. So I think like before I did CrossFit, and I guess people who don't do CrossFit, which it looks crazy. It can be, especially if you see it on TV, you're like, why would anyone do this? It just looks terrible, miserable. But then when you're involved with it for a long period of time, you kind of see how the programming works and how it's not just like bang, bang, bang every day. So for me, how CrossFit kind of helps me, I don't know, I've done a bunch of things, and I think CrossFit is the best thing for me personally that has led me to feel my best in the gym and outside the gym. And like I've been working out since I was 14, 15, and now I'm 30, and I still feel the strongest and most fit I've ever been. And I feel pretty good, which probably comes like with being a physical therapist and pretty much doing PT stuff every day. But yeah, I think it's prepared me. It prepares me and probably everyone else just for all basic stuff out in the real world where I see like, oh, like there's things that pop up, like I'm doing stuff in the garage. I'm like, I wouldn't be able to do this if I didn't know how to clean and jerk. Like I kind of made a post like a long time ago, putting like a heavy Yeti cooler up above like in a rafter. And I was like, if I didn't know how to like properly like use my hips to do this, like it's not going up there. And I just think it's one of the best things that I've done that has helped me with pretty much everything in my life.
Yeah, it's considered to be this general physical preparedness program that while we're squatting and pressing and doing all these cool things in the gym, it does help us to be able to do all the things we enjoy doing outside. Now, with that does come some moments where maybe we do experience, some tweaks, or maybe something gets a little bit inflamed or fatigued or whatever it might be. When folks come up to you as coach, kind of having your PT hat on as well, how do you guide or direct folks to figure out what to do with some of those things that they're experiencing? Like we all get a little sore, we all get a little fatigued. All of a sudden one day you wake up and that shoulder isn't moving the way it normally does or something like that. So how do you help or encourage folks to figure out what's the right person to go see to be able to deal with some of maybe that pain or some of those discomforts that they're experiencing?
Right. So like when I'm coaching, it's hard for me when as a PT and a coach where if I'm coaching in the class and there's a bunch of stuff going on, someone comes up to me and asks like a certain question, like the PT part of me wants to sit there and like dig in and really like talk about whatever. And as a coach, like you don't have much time. So it's like it's hard for me to kind of go back and forth between the two. Um, but yeah, and it's situational too. And like I'll like during the workouts in class and stuff like that, I can, which is also, this has helped me become a better PT. It was like, I've quickly been, or now I can quickly kind of figure out like, hey, let's tweak this, let's tweak that, let's decrease the load, blah, 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 stuff like that. And I say, if you still have issues afterwards, let's talk. And then I'll have some time after class and I'll say like, hey, I'll just do like a real simple, brief screen, I guess, if you want to call it that. And kind of take it from there where it's like, all right, I think we should do this, or I think you need to come see me, or etc.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, at least in my experiences, the first sign that a member experiences something that's uncomfortable, achy, sore, whatever it might be, there's sort of those red flags go off in their head of like, oh no, I'm experiencing some
Right.
pain, some discomfort, like something's wrong. I need to shut it down. And maybe that's partly because we're conditioned. If we go to, say, a doctor, they might tell us, hey, don't do this movement for a number of weeks or just completely shut it down. And so as a coach, it can be really challenging in those moments of like, hey, it's okay. Like pain, yes, we might be experiencing it, isn't the end of
Right.
the world. We can continue to move through it. And then, when you start to figure out, should I actually go see a physical therapist? What are typically some of the guidelines that you like to put out for folks? I know in my experience, it's usually like if something's like really sharp, or if it's like something that's been lasting for a considerable amount of time, we might want to think about seeing a physical therapist. But what have you come to know or understand of when you want to encourage somebody to, hey, you might want to go get a professional to look at this?
Right. So usually my typical like quick questions that I'll ask, like just like looking for red flags, like something like, is it shooting down your arm? Are you getting numbness or tingling in your hands, stuff like that, or down the leg or anything like that. And usually like my first go-to, I'll try to like change, like see what they're doing, see what like causes them pain, change up how the movement looks, decrease the range, stuff like that. Um, and again, like I guess it depends on like their severity and how they would rate the pain. Um, then like sometimes I'll say, hey, let's, because like luckily as a coach, I can kind of see what the program's like for the next or for the remaining week, and I can say like, hey, and these workouts, let's do X, Y, Z. If that helps, great. If it doesn't, let me know, and I can kind of point you to the right direction of like, hey, I think you need to go see somebody or see me. But I think the tricky part, kind of what you said earlier, is people are so like you experience a little bit of pain, and people are very quick to jump the gun, like, hey, let's go. I need to go see an ortho, or I need to go see my family medicine doctor. Which I'll try not to ramble about this too much. Which so that's I mean that's very like that's how it's been for the past whatever how many years, and
Mhm.
people don't realize that PT now is it's all pretty much in most states direct access. So like you don't need to, depending on your insurance, you can come straight to a PT without a referral or anything like that. Um, and it's interesting that like sometimes there's people at my gym that they'll come up to me one day and say, "Hey, I've been having pain for 2 months now. Like I've been to my primary care, they sent me to an ortho. Now they want me to go to PT." Where it's like, oh, if you would have just told me 2 months ago, like we probably could have nipped this in the bud a long time ago and saved you all this time. So yeah, it's tricky when trying to go back to your original question. It's tricky. It depends on a lot of things, and I try
Mhm.
to kind of use those guidelines to kind of figure out what's the best route for this person.
Yeah, and I think that's some good parameters around, hey, if it's been ailing you enough that something you're thinking about having to adjust the way you live your life, whether it's the way you work out or what you're able to do outside of the gym, then maybe we start to think about, hey, I want to go see somebody who's a professional, understands the way the body's supposed to move, and get their opinion. Maybe they can help clean things up or nip it in the butt, like you said before, it gets too bad. So when it comes to seeing a physical therapist, then talk us through what does a typical session look like for you? So if somebody is brand new, they're coming to see you, maybe they have something in mind that they want to get worked on, or maybe they're just kind of curious about, hey, I want to see if there's some ways I can help to be a little bit more efficient with my movement, less pain. What does a session look like when they're able to come through the door and work with you?
All right. So typically how it works is you come in, we talk for 5 to 10 minutes about what's going on. And a lot of times, if you take a good subjective history, they'll tell you a lot of what you need to know. And then from there, they tell me what's wrong. I'll see how they're moving. Like if someone, I'll try not to use too many CrossFit examples, but if someone comes and says like, hey, it hurts when I squat, I'll watch you squat, take you through just gross movement patterns. And then from there, we'll kind of dive into more individual muscles and joints and kind of take it from there, check all these red flags, make sure nothing sinister or crazy is going on. And then from there, depending on what you find, we make a plan, take care of it. So that's pretty much like the very brief version.
Yeah. And one of the things I really appreciate about seeing a physical therapist is how you all are trained so well in going to figure out like the nuances of like, okay, it hurts when you squat or when you press overhead. Let's go find the specific muscle, tendon, ligament, or joint that maybe isn't operating the way it should, versus just kind of looking at it, experiencing pain and be like, oh, just don't do anything. It's like, no, let's actually work through this because we know movement is a great form of medicine that we can keep going. So somebody comes in, they see you, you get to have an opportunity to work through an assessment. You've identified some things that maybe are challenging or some things you can work on. What does the process look like then once you've identified what is the problem, or maybe some of the different ways you go about treating it? Because there's a lot of different modalities. You hear people talk about soft tissue work and dry needling, and then you've got different mobility exercises. So walk us through maybe some of the different treatments that people might experience when they come in to see a PT.
Right. So, and again, it all comes down to what the situation is, how the person presents. So yeah, nowadays there's so many things, different ways of attacking someone's pain or something like that. So it all comes down to is like what's the severity, like how bad someone hurts, and so from there it's like you have routes such as soft tissue work, dry needling, like you said, cupping, Graston, or just like scraping, stuff like that, or just like basic, just like light stretching. Then you can get into some like more neurological treatments as far as like PNF stuff. And then if you go ask 10 different therapists, they'll all tell you 10 different things. And for me, I consider myself a little more hands off than some people, just because I like movement and stuff like that. So for me, it usually will tend that way a little bit more. And again, it all depends. And some people, they'll come in and tell you what has worked for them in the past. And they're like, if they're super confident, like, hey, this is what I've done before for this, and this helps a lot, then we can kind of go down that road too. But yeah, it all depends again, and depends on who you see and who you talk to.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question, but
no, it's interesting because I think it's unique when you start to hear those conversations unfold, like in the gym, because what ends up happening is I feel like the expert or the PT is probably the last person they go to. They usually are like, let me go to my friends, let me go to my family, let me go to YouTube. And then what have you tried? Oh, you like dry needling, you like soft tissue work, and then finally they go see the PT and figure out what's going on. So it's interesting when you hear that crosstalk of like, oh, you need to go get dry needled, or you need to go get this adjustment and whatnot. And there's so many options out there. So it's really about finding somebody who you trust and can communicate with on that.
And it's interesting too. Now, like nowadays, from I guess in the few years that I've practiced, I've noticed that a lot of things will work for people. So it's like you don't have to hit the nail on the head every single time, because a lot of things will work. And I guess that's the beauty of the body responding to things. And it's just so there's a lot of different avenues you can take.
Yeah. And one of the things that I know I've experienced and working with PTs and other folks is we'd love to keep people from needing to see you or to go in and work with you. And so when you start to think about this idea of preventative action as somebody who's big on movement and priming the body and doing those little things before or after workouts to help you to feel your best, What are some of the things that you've come to understand or know that maybe have been helpful as coach and PT for getting people to avoid the necessary visits because they're taking care of their bodies in the course of their day?
Right. So, as you said, it's like I try to practice in a way that I don't want people to need me, and that's probably not a very good business model, but it is what it is. That's just what I believe. So yeah, so like usually when I'm like treating people, and like I try to be very like I don't want to call it holistic in my approach, but a lot of things I'll do with people are more preventative for other stuff. I just don't tell them that. I'm like, all right, here's like, I know you got this going on with your ankle, but I see all these other different things. And if we do these 3 to 5 movements like every day, that covers a lot of your bases. So I guess that's my way of being preventative for people just without telling them. Um, so yeah, that's what I try to. Same with when I'm coaching. I try to like throw these little things in here and there. It's like, hey, these are the important things with, and then like, don't worry about these. Don't worry about this other fancy stuff. Like, here's the low hanging fruit. And like when it comes to stuff, what you guys know, stuff like sleep, diet, all that kind of stuff. It's like if you hammer that stuff and you move well on a most of the time, then you should be pretty good.
Hmm. It's funny you mentioned the idea of low hanging fruit, and there's been a couple sources I've pulled from lately that I've really appreciated. One being Kelly Starrett with his book Built to Move, as well as some
Hmm.
others, where just adding simple things like being able to walk. We added a dog to the family, so like walking a little more consistently. I was like, wow, it's amazing how much this combats sitting all day. Or picked up something from Kelly Starrett's book of trying to sit on the floor a little bit more. And it's amazing how
Hmm.
like you force your hips into some different positions by sitting on the floor versus on a couch or a
Right.
chair.
Right.
And so it's those little things that can make a big difference. Are there certain practices that you love to incorporate into your day that you found to be really helpful for you when it comes to keeping your body feeling good and moving well?
I wouldn't say there's like specific things that like I'll try to do throughout the day. And again, for me as a physical therapist, I'm sitting here doing it all the time, like all day, every day. So like for me, that I use that as like my own PT time. I'm like, all right, I feel pretty good because I'm just doing this all day with people. But like yeah, like you said, like now I have a toddler, and so like I'm having to do all sorts of things on the floor, and it definitely like, and I tell people too, like when people are like you were saying, like it puts you in different positions, and people talk to me like, hey, like how do I improve my squat? And like my simple answer is you got to squat more, and you got to spend more time in a squat. And so like for me, I feel like I'm always in wonky positions on the floor and stuff like that, which I guess that comes down like to people's lifestyle and stuff like that. Um, but no, just moving. And I'm a big believer of like no movements are bad movements, which that it's all contextual too. So for me, like I try to move in any way I can just because it just keeps me, I guess it keeps me limber. And I like, and again, so like for me, I've been doing CrossFit for 5+ years at this point, and like I bang myself up pretty good through in the gym, and but I feel pretty good. And again, that probably comes back to doing PT stuff throughout the day. But I like to think if you move well and smart consistently throughout the week, you should be pretty good. Like you should that's a good place to start.
Yeah, adding in those opportunities to move outside of the 1 hour class, getting on the floor with kids or pets, going for a walk, either by yourself or with others. Like it's amazing how just adding that little extra movement can make a huge difference. And one of the things I noticed too, especially following some of the social media content you put out there, is challenging your body to get into some different positions or things we maybe don't normally get a chance to do. In CrossFit, it's very common that like we're moving kind of straight up and down with squats and lunges and presses.
Hmm.
We're not doing a whole lot of rotating or getting off
Right.
balance, which, when it comes to the baseball or some of these other sports, they're off balance and rotating and twisting and doing things all the time. So I always appreciate, hey, how do we just find ways to challenge the body versus being very stagnant in the way
Right.
that we think about movement? So talk to us a little bit about some of the inspiration around that.
Right. Yeah, so again, like in the past 5 to 10, like 5 years of like I go back and forth, or I kind of bounce around all the place with kind of what I believe and stuff like that. But yeah, like what you're saying is in CrossFit, and it's wherever I feel like, or any form of exercise, everyone's so focused on keeping everything stiff. Which again, when you're squatting or deadlifting something super heavy, yeah, like you need to be that way. But I also tell people like, yeah, and when we're exercising, it's important to say tighten your core, stuff like that. But like in real life, that's not how it goes. Like, and it's crazy when people like, because this happens more than people think. Is people can do all these heavy lifts and stuff like that, and they tweak their back like picking up a hair dryer off the ground. I'm like, it's to them it's crazy, but to me it's not. And it's whenever I use this example when if you train, I'll just use the spine as an example. So if you're training your spine to be stiff all the time, it's not going to want to do anything else. So it's as soon as because in life you're gonna be in positions where you're have to bend the spine. If it can't, if it doesn't want to do it under load, or if it's not used to it, it's not gonna like it. So like for me, like just putting my kid in the car and like I consider myself somewhat fairly a decent athlete and like kind of fit, and that's hard for me just to like pick him up or and like reach into the car. I'm like I can feel my back really working, and if you're not used to that type of load in those different positions, it's not going to like it, and it's going to spaz out on you or something like that. And same with rotating, where the spine is meant to rotate and stuff like that. And people, I don't know what, like people think it's okay to swing a baseball bat or a golf a club as hard as you can, but they're nervous to do any form of just light resistance moving the spine. So like when you think about it that way, you're like, oh yeah, there is a little disconnect there. So it's I try not to. If you follow my stuff, you've seen my stuff. I'm very big on rotating and putting the spine under load, contextually speaking. So yeah, that's kind of where it's evolved in the past 5 years. But I learned luckily for me, one of my grad school professors was very big on stuff like that. So I think I'm very lucky to have that prior knowledge and exposure prior to practicing, where some PTs come out of school and all they know is bird dogs, stiff spine, stuff like that, which again, there's nothing wrong with that stuff, but that's all they know. So
Yeah,
it's tough.
I love the way that you connected some of the movements we're doing in the gym, some of the movements we're doing, very intentionally of rotating to prepare ourselves for whatever life has to offer. People want to go out and play pickleball and golf and softball or whatever else that they're being asked to do. And those are not rigid positions you're going to be in for that entire sport. The goal of training is to help prepare you to have fun and enjoy all those sports and everything else. So putting yourself into some of those challenging positions and, sort of training your body, saying, hey, you have the ability to stay stable here and you can still support yourself in picking up your kid or rotating or moving some groceries around or whatever that might be, which I always think is really important to make those connections of like, why are we training? Why are we doing these exercises, these stretches, these mobility drills? Well, it's to prepare us for a life that's
Right.
hopefully pain-free, which I think is a really cool piece that you highlighted there. So one of the things you mentioned is that you were able to work in a clinic for a little bit coming out of school, and then you recently ventured out into doing some of your own work. So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about what that journey has been like of creating and building your own brand and how you get to help and interact with folks with that.
It's very scary. So I'll start there. So yeah, I worked at a clinic in Clayton for a couple years, and I always knew like with like a certain population I wanted to work with, like mainly CrossFitters, because that's like that was like my thing when I was in grad school. I was like, oh, I want to be the CrossFit guy. So yeah, I worked there for a couple years, and I always knew I kind of wanted eventually I would go out on my own. And so I think also being in the CrossFit space, working out for all these years, and then I started coaching and stuff like that. It kind of helped me set up, I guess, like get my name out there, and kind of like got to the point where people from multiple gyms would come to me in Clayton at my old job to see me, and I was like, you know what, maybe we can do this. And it got down to the point where my wife was like, if you're gonna do it, you gotta do it now. And I was like, all right. So that was scary, but it's definitely been different, but it's been fun that the way it's set up now is I can work a little bit less, see patients that I want to see, and it's gone well so far, and then we have big plans moving forward.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about how you came up with the name and what that represents in terms of a brand and how you think about
Right.
movement and how you think about working with folks?
Right. So I actually came up with the name when I was in grad school. So when I was in grad school, this is before I started my first job out of grad school. I started the whole LLC, and I came up with Beyond Movement because I was like, all right, I want to go like how I like to think about things and how I practice goes beyond movement. It talks about like sleep and other stressors in your life and etc. All I try to factor all things in your life that can affect pain, etc. So that's kind of how I came up with the idea of beyond movement. And then so out of college, I started working for my other job, and the LLC was just kind of sitting there. After a year, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to deal with that. I'm not going to do my own thing. I'm just going to work here. So I got rid of that. And then I guess about a year ago, when I was real getting serious about kind of going back out on my own, I had to redo the whole LLC process, change the name just a little bit. And then that's kind of how it started. And I think looking back now, I'm very happy with the name and how I kind of go about doing things, and I think it's gonna go well in the long run.
Yeah, one of the things I know I appreciate, like you said, is bringing all of these factors under one roof of how we think
Hmm.
about how we can live a happier, healthier life. It's more than just the way we move, more than just the way we sleep or eat, but it's all of those things, how they play and interact with each other, that holistic approach, if you will. You mentioned that you worked at a clinic in Clayton coming out of school. There's a lot of different types of
Hmm.
physical therapists out there. You might get almost prescribed to go see one after a procedure or to help you get back up and running to go back to work. They have different clinics. Like you said, you have some that you hear about as cash based. Can you walk us through like what are some of the different types of physical therapists and what would you say you currently fall under in terms of how you work with folks at Beyond Movement?
Right. So I guess the very broad different topics of or I guess categories of physical therapy. So like me, I would just consider myself an outpatient musculoskeletal physical therapist. There's some that work more in neurological cases. So like I don't really mess around with too much of that stuff. So you have your neuro, you have your peds, which is more like more child development stuff like that. You have inpatient, which is like hospital stuff, which I've done a little bit of that when I was in grad school. Um, so yeah, and like a lot of so I think the broad, or I guess most people would their understanding of PT probably falls under more orthopedic musculoskeletal PT, just because people aren't exposed to the other stuff as much. Um, so and I guess everyone like the big you have your big ortho clinics, which are like I guess I don't want to name drop too many, but like so like your Raleigh ortho, Cary ortho, stuff like that. And under those umbrellas, they kind of have their own PT services. If you see the orthopedist, they'll see you, write a script for PT. They'll try to send you to their physical therapist there. Um, but what a lot of people don't know is as a patient, you can go wherever you want, and to go see a physical therapist. That most people think it's like, oh, they wrote a script for here, I gotta go here. I'm like, no, you can go see whoever you want, depending on insurance and stuff like that. Which I guess that's where for me it can get a little tricky and gray, where people don't understand the difference between cash pay and insurance based. So for me, I'm just cash pay, which there's pros and cons to both. I won't get into too much of that. Um, but yeah, for me, everything's just cash pay um, versus the insurance side. Again, I don't know if that answers your question or not, but
No, it definitely helps because I know I've seen and interacted and heard from other folks about that process of like, hey, I went to go see a doctor. They recommended I see a PT, or maybe I just had a procedure done, and they've recommended somebody in that network. And then you have others who have branched out or have their own business. They talk about how they're cash based, and so folks sometimes are like, well, who do I go see? Should I go to the clinic down the road and get an appointment there? Should I go see, my friend who works inside of a gym? And one of the things that I know I've come to appreciate is if you're somebody who appreciates the time and attention as well as getting a very thorough experience around what you might be going through. Folks who are in that cash-based practice tend to be able to spend that time with you and give you a 50-minute to an hour-long appointment and really try and figure out what's going on, and then, be with you throughout that journey. Versus some other practices, sometimes they can be time hampered, where it's like, hey, you've got 20 or 30 minutes, you're in and out, and you may not get the quality of care you'd be looking for. Would you say that's kind of your experience?
Yeah. That's one of the main reasons why I went cash pay in the first place. So not all clinics, but like usually it's probably the bigger corporation PT clinics that you see all over the place. And the unfortunate part with insurance sometimes is for a clinic to function and to stay above water, it's like you got to see so many patients because with insurance you don't get reimbursed but so much money, and so to counter that they'll cram you with patients, and as a PT it's not fun and it's overwhelming because like even when I was in grad school doing my last rotation, I was at a clinic and they were trying to have me see like 3 to 4 people at one time, and I'm like, this is crazy. Like, and people like to think that's the norm, and I guess it has been for a lot of clinics, but I'm like, no, like I don't know what's going on with all these people. So that's where, and again, not all insurance PT clinics are like that. A lot of them now are one-on-one, like your smaller ones. But for me, that's probably the biggest plus side of cash pay, because I don't have to see so many patients throughout the day, and I can spend a lot more time really just honing in on certain things with one person.
Yeah, I think that personal time and attention is really important. And when you look at insurance based versus cash pay, some folks might say, well, cash pay maybe is a little bit more expensive. And I think part of that is just weighing out some of the things that you value. Like you said, like if I want the personal time and attention to get this taken care of, maybe even more efficiently than seeing someone else, yes, it could on paper look like it's a little bit more, but you might be able to get some help and relief with whatever the issues you're going through a little bit faster, get that
Right.
higher quality of care, and it can make up for it in the long run.
Right. And I've had a handful of patients tell me like they went to these big ortho clinics before and then they come see me and they're like, it's crazy the difference between the two. And I tell people patients aren't stupid. Like they know when the person they're working with isn't can't pay attention to them because they don't have time. And you can tell. So that's just it's crazy how things work with some places. But yeah. So it's just to me like on the surface it can be a little bit more expensive, but I think like if you want that time and attention, it's worth it in the long
Mm-hmm.
run.
Yeah, 100% agree. And so you've had a chance to work in a clinic, getting out into your own practice now. When you think about your day to day and getting a chance to see patients, what are some of the things that get you most excited or get you most
Hmm.
fired up about waking up and getting in to work with folks and helping them to work through whatever pain that they're
Hmm.
experiencing and move a little bit better?
Right. For me, I guess there's two different examples where a lot of my patients are in the CrossFit space, and I guess the most satisfaction I get is when they text me or something to say like, "Hey, like I was able to do this workout, like totally fine, PR'd, crushed my time, yada yada." For me, I'm like, "All right, cool." That makes me feel like, "Oh yeah, I PR'd too." Like I'll take that as a win for me. And then on the other side of it, it's like now I have a handful of clients that aren't in the CrossFit space and they don't have a big background in working out. So like so this is like stuff I do is completely new to them, and like it blows my mind when we I get somebody and do something very simple. They're like, I've never done anything crazy. Like I've never done something this intense in my life. And like to me, it's not that intense to them, and to me, it's mind blowing that I'll try not to go on another tangent here. Um, but the satisfaction I get that helping them or showing them that they can do these things that to them thought were never achievable, and they can totally it's easy for them to do it, and it's to me that's enough satisfaction from that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so exciting to see it. Like you said, it's almost on different levels in the same sort of ballpark of people being able to do things either they didn't think they could or maybe were no
Hmm.
longer accessible to them. And sometimes it's a simple movement. Like, I didn't realize I could get up off the floor. I didn't realize I could go
Hmm.
for a walk. I didn't realize I could do this and not experience the back pain or the hip pain or the knee pain. Or it's somebody who has been trying to push physically to whatever their potential limit is, and they didn't think something was possible, and all of a sudden they did achieve it. And you're like, it's amazing to see, even on that spectrum, how people can get so excited about seeing what their body's capable of, and how that gets you really fired up to coach and to help them as a PT.
Right. Yeah. To me, those wins make it all worth it.
Yeah. And one of the things that, kind of keep revolving around is this idea of quality of life. And you talk about how trying to get people out of pain, moving better, moving freely. You also talk about how within your brand, you think about improving and enhancing a variety of areas of somebody's life, from sleep and nutrition to movement. So when you think about this concept of quality of life and helping people improve that, live something that maybe is a happier, healthier, what does that mean to you, or how do you think about that concept of improving somebody's quality of life?
Yeah. So to everyone, and everyone has their own definition of, I guess, what it means to them. For me personally, it's just being able to do all the things that I would ever need to do. Because right, like I never want to get to the point in my life where I can't do something, or I have to depend on someone else to do that. But for some people, it's not. I mean, it's very different, and it depends on what when I'm working with people. It all depends on what their goals are, and some people don't have high aspirations to do like crazy things like in CrossFit and stuff like that. It's just to be pain free and or just be able to go on a walk. And one thing I try to do with a lot of patients is kind of implement things that I would consider like quality of life benefits, and implement that kind of stuff into their I guess PT sessions without kind of like talking about it or telling them, where because like for me this is like this area is like this is my life, this is what I focus on. And like so like I'll just use the example, like if you go to some PT clinics and you have knee pain or something like that, they're just going to focus on your knee, and like that's great because that's the whole point. You're there so your knee stops hurting. But for me, I try to like always, I guess this is where like my CrossFit background and coaching kind of comes in. Like I'm always thinking about someone's like heart health, lung health, stuff like that, where I tell people it's like, yeah, like I'd rather your knee hurt than you have like cardiovascular issues down the road. So like, yeah, like this is important, but these things are also probably a little bit more important. So I try to just like implement things and like that into my practice. Because I think to me that's what quality of life means to me, is being able to do whatever you want to do. And people tell me also, it's like I get winded by going up some stairs, and you're like, if you're like, yeah, my knee hurts when I go up the stairs, but I'm also winded at the top. I'm like, all right, well now I want to get you out of pain, but I also want to make you stronger and increase your endurance and stuff like that. So that's kind of where I'll try to throw things in without explicitly telling them.
Yeah, it was one of the things I appreciate is the ability to connect with folks individually, of like, hey, what is important to you? And you
Hmm.
mentioned for you, it's this ability to have the freedom to do all the things that you want to do, with your family and with your friends and within your fitness. And so figuring out, how do I make that happen? And then how that trickles into the folks you get to work with. Okay, I understand you're coming here to get out of pain, but I can also see there's probably some other areas that we can improve and enhance. And
Hmm.
you didn't even realize how good you could feel, or to get to the top of the steps and maybe not be as winded, or be able to
Right.
go on a longer walk or something like that. So yeah, really figuring out what's important to people. What does it mean for them to improve the quality of their life? And then sprinkling it in. We're not going to make these big overarching or overwhelming changes, but it's those little things that you can
Right.
start to get somebody moving in the right direction. You mentioned earlier that, when it comes to movement, there's maybe some things that you get a chance to do on a day-to-day basis as you work with patients and demonstrate and work through things. You also mentioned how important the holistic side of things are for you. So I'd be curious, do you have any other practices or habits or things that you do each day that help you to live the quality of life that you'd like, maybe beyond movement?
Hmm. Yeah, so like, and it kind of going back to what we were talking about before, is just like the low hanging fruit. because I mean, there's nothing like specific, like movement wise, I'll implement throughout the day, which again, it's because I'm doing it during work. Um, but the main things for me are just like trying to stay not dialed in. Like I try to do my best on nutrition, but like things like water, sleep. Like I think sleep's probably the biggest one I'm really neurotic about. I'm always trying to like get 8 hours of sleep. I'm always because like to me that's probably one of the most, if not the most important way to recover and feel your best. Which nowadays everyone like the way I guess society is set up is just work, 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 no sleep. Or I guess the grinder mentality of you just like I'll sleep when I'm dead, but I'm like, that's probably not the best way to think about it. But so like for me, that's probably the biggest one, sleep. And I'm not perfect on my diet, but like I always strive to be. Um, so those are probably the big ones.
Yeah, I think if I could redesign sort of the hierarchy of fitness, I probably would put sleep as the
Hmm.
base pillar, because I think, like you said, it is so important and is one of the best and easiest ways we can get access to feeling better, recovering better, and helping our bodies to do what they're capable of doing. And then nutrition, which is currently at the base of that hierarchy. So if you get those two things dialed in,
Right.
it might be surprising how good your body can feel, and it might take care and clean up some of those things that aren't feeling so great on their own.
Right.
So those are
And
important.
that's one of the big things too. I'll ask patients when they come in, which I think they get very thrown off when I ask them. I'm like, how's your sleep and like how's your stress? Because like those are two big. Like again, I would put that at the bottom of the pyramid, and I'm like, I think that's you change that up with a lot of people, and I think a lot of problems would go away.
Yeah, it really is amazing, because so many of us think about I got to work hard for an hour and I got to really push it and I got to learn new skills and all this and that. And it's like, if we just get some of the basics right, you're going to be really surprised at how that improves the quality of your life. So I think those are some
Mhm.
really great highlights. So for folks who are interested in connecting with you, because you put out some really great content on social media, different things to think about when it comes to movement, different things to work on if you've been neglecting it, or if folks want to reach out because maybe there's somebody who is dealing with pain that they're interested in getting out, what are some of the best ways that folks can connect, follow, or get in touch with you?
Probably the easiest way would be to either message me through the Instagram account, which is I think it's Beyond Movement Physio. No fancy, no uppercase, no dashes or anything like that. You can send me a message through there, or you can just email me at beyondmovement, letter P at gmail.com. Backtracking to when I first created that email might not be the best way to put it, but yeah,
Yeah.
beyondmovementpp at gmail.com is the best way to do it.
Yeah, definitely give Austin and Beyond Movement a follow on social media. Reach out if you're in the area or you're looking to get out of pain. So much good stuff out there. So Austin, thanks so much for jumping on the podcast today, sharing some of your thoughts and insights around physical therapy and how others can work on improving the quality of their life by focusing on things like sleep and nutrition and movement, and how they can go about interacting and working with the physical therapist to feel their best.
Thank you for having me on. It was super fun. Hope to do it again.
Yeah, definitely.